really look at the statistics and understand the nature of the problem and how we've gotten to where we are today. I think the sad fact of the matter is that the history job market has been in a near perpetual state of crisis since 1970. And that is because I think we have a culture that focuses doctoral students on only one job market, which is primarily at research universities. And we disperse the authority to decide how many job candidates enter that job market out to over 150 doctoral programs. When combined with the often wild swings in hiring at public colleges and universities, I think we're set up for regular and near perpetual crises in the market. So let me start with the sad truth about the current state of the academic job market, which is the worst we've seen in almost 40 years. What makes this even more difficult is that it comes just 2 years after the best job market that we've ever seen in our tracking statistics at the AHA. Back in 2008, I was quite happy to note that we were seeing the highest number of job advertisements on record, with over 1,000 jobs reported that year. Unfortunately, since then, as many of you probably know, the job market has essentially fallen off a cliff, falling basically 46% in the past 2 years to just 560 positions advertised this past year. The only really bit of good news I can add, and I would emphasize this in contrast to the Inside Higher Ed article that I imagine many of you read, which is that the job ads have actually been going up. As of right now, they're up about 21% from where they were at the same point last year. But even with that, you can see that this would still make only a fairly small dent in the number of job ads. In comparison to this, actually, it's kind of surprising to me, the number of people that are interviewing here at the AHA is actually up much more significantly than you see here. But by the end of the last meeting, we'd heard from 115 positions, which was down from 198 the year before. As of this year, I talked to them this morning, we knew about 160 positions. So I mean, we're seeing a big uptick this year, which is actually larger here at the meeting than it is in the job ads that we've received in perspectives. So, but the trend in jobs obviously is only one part of the equation. And as you can see, for quite a while now, we've been conferring about 1,000 PhDs in the discipline per year, really for more than a decade. And these numbers have been fairly consistent through the job crises of the 1990s, and again in the mini job crisis that we had in 2002 and 2003. And there are a number of factors that go into the decisions to admit and support doctoral students to their studies that I want to get to in a minute. But I want to start by emphasizing the challenge in trying to guess what the job market will be like for a doctoral student at the time of their admission. And when you take into consideration that it takes an average PhD about 8 years to earn their degree, any number of factors can come into play. To give you a sense of the hazards of trying to predict where the job market will be when someone finishes a PhD, I thought it would be useful to show a couple of personal examples. When I first started a PhD program back in 1988, my department chair and a significant number of really smart people, including the head of the Mellon Foundation, were all insisting that we were facing a crisis of a shortage of history PhDs. And my department chair was really eager and emphatic about the fact that I needed to get in. It was really important for me to do that. In 1990, my wife got pregnant. My advisor, God bless him, said, you know, German intellectual history is not going to feed a growing family. Stick with the gig at the AHA. And as it turned out, that was some of the best advice I've ever received in my life. Because by the mid-1990s, we were facing a really severe job crisis, which, you know, given that it was sustained pretty much the entire 1990s, is still remembered by many folks who received their PhDs in that period as a very grim time. And then again, when I started back up in 2001, I felt obviously a bit of a hypocrite because in the job report of that year, I pointed out that there were more jobs advertised at that point than there had been in 30 years. But there were still significantly more PhDs being conferred that year than there were jobs. And so at that time, I'd emphasized in the report then that departments should be acutely conscious of the fact of what they're training their students for. I keep bringing this up. And it seems as if when I worry about the job market situation, that seems to be responded to by PhD programs as, well, let's flatten out the number of students that we accept into our program. When I say the job ads are up, that seems to be the charge ahead. Let's increase the number of student admissions. And so I'm always very worried about when I write these reports because it always seems to be this sort of dysfunctional response in the PhD programs, even though they have, as you can see, somewhat flattened out. I think when I But it does create this sort of sense that it's really a simple supply-demand thing, that the solutions are to either increase the number of jobs or to reduce the number of doctoral students. And I think one of my other concerns is that it's a much more complex picture. It's much more difficult to simply say, well, we cut the number of PhD students, that would be, that would solve all the problems on the job market. I think, because I think one of the things we don't keep in account is that the number of people who have been receiving full-time tenure-track academic jobs has actually been going up through the past 35 years. And I think it's something that, we have a tendency to emphasize the concern about the fact that there are part-time faculty, and the number of part-time faculty has also been going up at basically at a similar rate. Part-time faculty tends to account for about 40% of the PhDs in any given year. But we more or less doubled the number of people who are receiving, who are working full-time over that past 30-year period, even despite all these ups and downs in the academic job market. And it makes it a much more complex picture to simply say, cut back on the number of students that you're admitting. And I think it's important to keep in mind that the growth you see there, in terms of thinking about the larger ecology of higher education and its employment, is that this increase is based on a very simple increase. I mean, not a very simple increase, but a general increase in the number of history majors over the past, basically over the same period. And this is based in large part on an increase in the number of history courses that have been put back into the general education requirements. This happened pretty much through the mid-'80s. And what we discovered is that by getting students into those general education requirements, they get exposed to history, they get a couple history courses to develop, and that a significant number of them then choose to major in the discipline. And that's really helped between the increased number of jobs to teach these gen ed courses and the increased number of positions of jobs to teach the students at the upper levels. That's created a significant amount of that increase that you saw there in terms of the number of jobs. Now, as Martin will be quick to emphasize, this increase in the gen ed courses has led to, I think, a slightly dysfunctional two-tiering of the employment market within higher ed. A lot of those gen ed courses are being taught by adjuncts in a variety of different types and capacities. They can be postdocs, the traditional, the sort of classic freeway flyers,